Hello, today we're going to attempt to repair this Bose Wave Radio. I've seen videos about recapping it to prevent the please wait error. Let's take a look at the please wait error. If I select anything here, I get just please wait and it doesn't play. We're going to replace all the capacitors on the main board today. I'm going to show the complete disassembly, cap replacement, and reassembly. And if you're seeing this video, it means I was successful. Okay, first things first, let's take a look at the model number that we're working on. Your model may be similar and have the same problem, but this is specifically for this particular model Bose. And this model is AWRCC1. So right there, AWRCC1. All right, to get started, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Phillips head number 2 screws. Got my handy dandy screwdriver. Once the 5 screws are removed, we'll flip the unit back over onto its feet. Hold the top and bottom so it doesn't fall apart while you do that. There we go. Make sure you hold the bottom. And now you can lift the lid straight up. Straight up and off. Put this out of the way. All right, now we're going to need to get the speaker area removed. The way you do that is there's one screw here that holds the transformer on, and I've seen some places where they disconnect the wiring, but I don't think that's really going to be necessary. And we have 2 speaker wires encased in foam, and they are clipped into the circuit board down here, and you use tweezers to get down in there and unclip them from their sockets. I'll show you in detail. They've got a little clip to them. So I have a couple of different tools to get in there. This one is not long enough. This one will be more than long enough to get in there and unclip the wires. Okay, so we can see here, right side, little clip to make it come apart. So we have that one done. I'll go ahead and unclip this one. This one faces to the left. This clip for the speaker. So we've got that, and then let me turn this around so you can see the front with these 2 wires free. The next thing I want to do is remove the circuit board here. These screws are a little shorter. So these screws being a little shorter, put them in a separate container. Don't want to put the long screws where the short ones go. And with the 2 screws out, the circuit board panel will be loose. And last but not least, they put a long screw in the lid that holds a transformer on. Same size screw as the bottom case. So I go over there. For the transformer, we're going to lift up, and it comes right back. And if you have the display panel disconnected and the speakers disconnected from the circuit board, this entire assembly will lift straight up and away. So I'll put that aside so we don't damage anything. Okay, for the rest of this repair video, I am going to turn the unit around so I can work on it correctly. So turn the unit around. Alright. So we're going to place the display out of way but still connected. And we'll put the transformer where it doesn't flop around. If you want to disconnect the wires for the transformer, there's a clip here and a clip here. So if you need more mobility, you can do that. Once you have the unit in this state, then the CD player simply lifts up and off. And it depends upon how you want to work it. You can disconnect the CD player with this cable and this cable. They pull out and push in. I prefer to leave them because these old units, pulling and pushing cables that were factory installed, you might have a situation where they don't go in easy or they tear. So if we don't have to remove it, I like to not remove it. So I'm just going to put it aside. And then this is the main circuit board here. Some people have removed it, these two screws remove it, and work on it outside the unit, but this is good enough to work on right here. So the capacitors we need to replace are underneath this metal can. And all you need to do, there's a couple of tabs that have locks. So all we're going to do is we're going to grab a little screwdriver and we're just going to bend up. Now there's a can underneath, a covering underneath the board too. So some of the clips that face up, like this clip and this clip, are for the underside. Same with this clip and this clip. So that's for the other half of this. So the clips for the top are the ones that are facing down here on the ends. So we're just going to start on one side and just gently peel them up. There's a little indentation. I'll show it in more detail on the camera. So I'm just pushing them up gently, sliding them up. And on the front and on the back side, this clip and this clip have these little indentations in them that keep them locked in place. So we got the front off. The sides you don't have to worry about that. The sides are just press fit. And we'll just work it free. So if we look at this piece, you'll see that this clip has a hole, and this clip has a hole, and on the opposite side, there's a hole here and a hole here. So these 4 clips are the ones you actually have to disengage from the shell. The sides just press fit on either side. So here we have this. And that gets us access to the internal ones. And the capacitors I'm going to be replacing are the ones inside this shell first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 capacitors. And hopefully once we replace these 6 capacitors, we can turn on the unit and it will start to work correctly again. If we still have an issue, I'm going to try to replace these other capacitors on this main board. And hopefully that'll solve the problem. I'll let you know which one there is. Okay, so I'm going to now, for the rest of this video, I'm going to zoom into the workspace that I'm working on and show you my technique for removing the capacitors. All right, the first thing we need to do before we do anything on this board is we need to take a photograph of what the board looks like. So I'm going to take out my handy dandy cell phone. I'm going to go ahead and take a very nice, clear, close-up picture of what the board looks like, so that I know what values go where and what capacitors go where. Now the technique I'm going to use is something I've seen a number of people do with surface mount capacitors. I'm going to use the twist method for removing them. So we're not going to use any heat. We're not going to try to desolder them. I'm simply going to use the twist method. So we'll start with this capacitor over here. And we will simply twist, 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 and it removes. So a couple of twists and it removes. Okay, now we're going to remove the other capacitors in the same way, and only removing the capacitors. So that's the first one was there. So we'll grab this one. We're not pulling up, we're just twisting back and forth. Back and forth. And that removes the legs. You may have to twist back and forth a number of times, but you don't want to pull up because that'll lift the trace. Twist back and forth, pushing down a little bit actually, and eventually the wires inside the capacitor will give way. All right, we'll pick this one. Back and forth, 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 and you'll just feel it come right off. Okay, that's all the capacitors removed. The next step we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clean up all of the pads, little pads you see here, removing the leftover solder and removing the leftover little wires. We want to make sure we get all the leads that are embedded in the solder out of the board without laying on any of the other components, because they can easily short a component if you leave them in place. So just a little care to make sure you're keeping track of each one. We'll make sure that you don't end up with stuff shorting out components when the unit is hooked back up to power and you start moving it places. I'm going to go ahead and hook up my soldering iron so we have some heat, and I will go ahead and get my solder flux out. I've made a few changes to my workshop setup. I've got myself a magnifying glass so I can see what's going on the board. I've got my handy dandy soldering station over here. I have a brush and flux, very important. You'll need that for removing the old and putting the new work on. I have very small gauge soldering wire that has rosin inside of it. And last but not least, I have 2mm soldering braid, which will be used for desoldering everything. So I'm going to zoom in on the circuit board area, and then you'll hear me and I'll show you what I'm doing on the board. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put some of this paste flux using the brush onto all the terminals. Got my iron set at about 320. Let's go ahead and put the braid in and heat up the Okay, I'm doing the final pad now. There we go. Oh, I see a piece. Okay, now the board has been desoldered and all the pads are clean of the existing solder. So now we're ready to put the new components on. Okay, now I'm actually going to solder in the new components. I purchased axle lead components. They're regular electrolytics. These happen to be from Panasonic. I'm going to bend the leads to fit, and then we're going to solder them to the existing pads. You have to observe the correct polarity. Cut off the excess leads. One of the things I did do is I bought an extra one of each value. So if I screw up a capacitor, I cut the leads too short, I'm not sunk. So we'll go ahead and tin those pads, and we'll just grab our solder. There's still solder flux from when we cleaned it. And we'll go ahead and just use our iron with the clean pad and throw a little solder on there. Okay. Make sure right polarity, so negative is going to go to my left, which is probably the camera right. Grab my little tweezers, my pliers, and hope for the best. There we go. And we're soldered. Double check that we have the negative on the right side. We do. It's on the correct side. So ready to move on to the next one. Okay, next component going in. First we'll go ahead and tin the pads. That's in good. Right polarity. Okay, I'm going to finish it up and we'll be back when they're all installed. Okay, all the capacitors have been installed. Final check. Polarities. 6 capacitors replaced. This is going to be the moment of truth. We can power this up on a part, but I'm not sure if we're going to damage the output amplifier if we don't have the speakers connected. So we'll do a minimum of reconnection. So we'll carefully place the CD player back in its resting place, which gives me access to the outputs. I'll zoom out. So let's hook up the speakers. The transformer over here, so that I don't have to stretch the wires too much. There we go, we have speakers. This foam is terrible. All right, let's go ahead and plug in the power cord. Be a little careful with this thing with the lid off.
800-941 Sean, you want to be a part of the program?
Here we go. It works. There we go. It works. Woo! So we'll disconnect the speakers and we'll go ahead and reassemble the things that we need to reassemble. Don't need this anymore. Before we start figuring, let's get the power disconnected. Okay, power's out. And squeeze, pull. Squeeze, pull. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here, for reassembly, we need to flip up this CD player. Unit's unplugged, carefully. The capacitors, these are radial, and we want to make sure they won't short out because they're insulated with the top case. We want to make sure that they're not sticking up too high so that the case fits over top. The case, interestingly enough, says do not reuse. We're going to reuse it. Push. There we go. That looks good. Now we'll flip the unit for the CD player. It fits in these little round holes. Make sure those go in there. Now we're ready to put the speaker assembly back in place. And its foam is falling apart here. So I'll do my best. Tilt this to get the wires in. Snapped. Snapped. So I push these two in. If you need to use a tool, use a tool, make sure they seat it and snap into their respective sockets. The left one with the clip pointing to the left, right one with the clip pointing to the right. Then we lift this assembly up and it sets in the guide holes. We can swing these cables so they fit in a little slot here. Next part of the reassembly is the power supply. It just hooks into a little notch in the top cover. And it kind of just sits and dangles in the bottom. Screw will keep it in place. So we'll hold it. Remember, it takes a long screw. So I'm going to thread a long screw in by hand. I'm not going to tighten it down all the way just yet. I'll leave it a little loose. Because I want to make sure the rest of the wires are where they need to be. It may not be that they are. All right, I'm going to move the camera around to the front side so we can see what's going on in the front. All right, I moved the camera and we're going to replace the front panel. As you can see here, the ribbon cable has to come up and over the CD player. That's the way it's been folded. So we'll put this down. Ribbon cable comes out through here. And it snakes behind here. Put the display back in. Goes up underneath these two clips. Like so. Short screws for the front. All right, got our two screws in. Got this mess here. I'm going to use a vacuum cleaner for that. But we're in pretty good shape now. We can double check it again before we put the lid on.
and not appointing special counsel in this case.
Okay, it works great. All right, I'm going to vacuum up the debris here, the little vacuum cleaner, and then we'll put the case back on. All right, final reassembly of the unit. Got it cleaned up. Remember, when you reassemble it, you have to hold the top and the bottom, otherwise they'll fall apart. So we're going to hold, well, first we'll go ahead and grab the top section. And it goes straight down. And then grab from underneath, flip it over. It should be resting fine on all of its sides. And then it's a simple matter to put in the 5 screws. Be careful when screwing these in with the power screwdriver, as it's just plastic, and chances are pretty good that it's pretty aged plastic. So you don't want to make it too tight. I usually like to finish the last. I like to finish the last little bit by hand. That way you can feel it. Okay, let's put it back on its feet, clean it up, final test, put the lid on, please wait, it is normal for startup, and let's try AM/FM. Yeah.
I've been asked 1,000 times.
Okay, works perfect. That completes the Bose repair video. Hopefully this helps other people out that are having the same problem and need to recap their units.